This video is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. We are finally here to UFC 304. For the month of July, it was a bit different for fights, and we're very happy to finally get to the two-title fight card, headlined by Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2, and Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes 2. Two rematches at the top. The main card is really good. It's going to be quite late for the UK audience, or just the European audience in general, but the fight is happening in Manchester, and man, it's going to be quite late over there in the arena by the time Leon and Belal fight. Not only that, the whole card has 14 total fights. We also got Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. I am not calling him King Green. That's wild that he wants people to call him that. I didn't even know you're allowed to change your name to King. That's gonna be a changing of the guard. Bobby Green's like 40 years old. Paddy Pimblett's still in his 20s. Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape might actually happen if Manel Kape stays in the fight. Can you fight, man? What's going on? What's going on with these pullouts, man? He's been talking about he's gonna destroy this opponent, destroy that opponent. We haven't seen him fight since. Kape is a fun fighter to watch, man. He's very exciting. But man, did he hurt his momentum with those two pullouts. And yes, missing weight the first time against Nicolau, the opponent shouldn't have to fight you after that. You're pretty much just cheating going into the fight if you miss weight like that. But if the fight does actually happen, this could be a #1 contender fight, potentially, to see who fights Alexander Pantoja. So that flyweight fight is going to be very important. And we also have the featherweight fight of Arnold versus Giga Chikadze. It's been a while since we've seen Giga Chikadze fight as well. August of 2023 was the last time he fought against Alex Caceres. We have good prospects, a couple of them. Nathaniel Wood is still a good fighter, I think. Caolan Loughran is pretty decent, but I'm going to be honest, in my opinion, I think he's a bit overrated as a prospect. And he's going up against Jake Hadley, who's a very good opponent. It's going to be a fun fight. I've always been pretty high on Hadley's skills, but his results haven't been the best. He needs a lot of fine-tuning in his total game plan for fights, but that should be a very good one. And that goes into my pick for prospect of the night. There aren't a lot of them, but if I were to pick a prospect, it would be Nathaniel Wood. He's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, but arguably, Muhammad Naimov, who just beat him, should have gotten at least a point deduction, if anything, because of all the cheating in that fight. But Wood is a very skilled fighter. He might be a little bit small for the featherweight division, but so far as he's come up to the weight class, he has been performing pretty well, like against Andre Fili, Charles Jourdain, two credible opponents that are both much bigger than he is. And we'll see how he does against Daniel Pineda. The stake of the night, the fighter that is in hot waters, is probably Lukasz Brzeski. He's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. His only win against Walter Walker, who is Johnny Walker's brother, and if he loses to Mick Parkin, he could get cut. The fighter of the night, in my opinion, is the heavyweight champion of the world, the real heavyweight champion, Tom Aspinall. The man is defending his title against the hardest matchup stylistically in the heavyweight division for him. And if he tunes up that defense, he could be one of the most skilled heavyweights we've ever seen in the sport. A well-rounded fighter who can box, who can wrestle, who can submit you with many different kind of positions. Good leg kicks, good footwork, good hand speed, hits really hard, big guy, athletic. It's just that boxing defense he's gonna really fix up there. And then he'll be the complete total package. And I would say the banger of the night, the most explosive fun fight on the card, is that co-main, Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes. There is probably nothing on the card more exciting than this. It is such a good fight. 100% is going to be a finish. And it's between two heavyweights, some of the best heavyweights in their actual primes fighting each other. We're not always super excited for heavyweight fights, but this is definitely one of the times we are. And the fight of the night, the overall best fight on the card, I think is also the co-main event. Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes. And I'm not even joking. I think this is overall just the best fight throughout. Leon and Belal might be a little bit more skilled, but with how that fight could play out, I wouldn't want to call it the fight of the night. I think Aspinall and Blaydes, because of how their styles mesh up together, because of how much back and forths they can have. Blaydes stopping the takedowns, having a box with Aspinall. Aspinall now beating him in that area. Maybe Blaydes now has to take him to the ground and use his wrestling against the BJJ of Aspinall, with knockout and submission implications throughout the entire fight. There's not a better fight on the card than Aspinall versus Blaydes, in my opinion. And with that, let's go right to the fights. We're going to start with the very first one, Modestas Bukauskaus versus Marcin Prachnio, the sons of Vitor Prachnio. I got Bukauskaus in this fight. I think he just hits harder. He has better punching form. They both move around and like to back away from the opponent, but I think Prachnio is going to be the one that backs up more than Bukauskaus. He likes to throw these very awkward hooks and haymakers as the opponent attacks him. The funky head movement could get him away from some of the right straights of Bukauskaus, but I think he might get timed by an uppercut or a knee or something like that. He dips his head way too much, and you just got to bring your leg up and hit him, man. But the thing is, they both have mutual opponents. They both fought Vitor Prachnio, who destroyed both of them, and they both fought Khalil Roundtree, who TKO'd Bukauskaus with that low side kick, destroying his knee. But Prachnio beat Khalil Roundtree. And it was off of his very awkward head movement. But I think Bukauskaus' fundamentals is going to win in this fight. Landing a big shot, maybe a high kick or something, just bring that leg up and put him down with the 1-2 right afterwards. So then we go to the women's strawweight division between Shauna Bannon versus Ardelean. Bannon is 30 years old, 5'5", 65-inch reach with a pro record of 5-1. She's coming off one loss to Bruna Brazil, who's going to be fighting later, and most of her fights go to a decision. She's not really a knockout artist. She's not really a big submission artist. She's got good striking though, clean, technical, composed striking, but she's going up against Ardelean, who's the daughter of the Tasmanian Devil, has a windmill style, throwing craziness all over the place, hailstorm of punches from every single angle, no technique sometimes. At least that's what she was showing a lot in the Jess Munane fight. Ardelean is 32 years old, 5'3", with a 61-inch reach, a little bit longer than Artem Lobov's. She has a pro record of 9-5, and this is a very interesting thing about her fight record. She went 4-5 in her first 9 fights, and ever since has won consistently, and now is on a 5-fight win streak. This is very interesting. So Ardelean fought Zhang Wei Li back in 2016, got submitted in the second round. Took a break after 2019 and came back an absolute monster. So a record may trick you here and make you think that maybe she's not on the level of Shauna Bannon. This might be a wild scrap because of how Alice fights. She comes out there guns blazing, just throwing shots all over the place, wildness. She definitely showed that against Jess Munane, but that reckless style can definitely cause her to lose in the later rounds. Shauna Bannon is a lot more composed, switching stances, goes southpaw for the kick to the body, good jab, good straight punches, but I don't know if her composed fundamental style can beat the windmill style of Ardelean. Her last 3 wins are first round finishes, and in this lower level of women's MMA, I don't know if Bannon can get through that hailstorm. So I'm gonna go with Ardelean, and I'm gonna go by a second round submission. Then we go to the welterweight division, Sam Patterson versus Kiefer Crosbie, the English versus the Irish, 28-year-old Sam Patterson, who's 6'3", 78-inch reach, enormous for the welterweight division. He's 11-2-1 in MMA, where Kiefer Crosbie is 34 years old, 5'11", 70-inch reach, and a 10-4 record in MMA. And in his last fight, Kiefer Crosbie fought Sam Patterson's French lost brother, Kevin Jousset. They look strangely similar, body type and everything. Sam Patterson has to get the fight to the ground. He's got a weird long style, and he could catch Kiefer Crosbie with something over the shoulders or on the temple as Kiefer Crosbie's trying to get his way in there. But Crosby's going to be throwing heat at Patterson, and Patterson doesn't have much defense. His head is just there to be hit a lot of times, and Yanel Ashmos definitely showed that. The guy who knocked out Sam Patterson about a minute into the fight. And Kiefer Crosby's submission defense definitely did not look that great against Kevin Jousset. He kind of just sat there and allowed Jousset to get his neck. Sam Patterson also has good submissions. If he follows his French brother there, he should be able to get a rear naked choke as well. In fact, that's how he won his last fight against Johan Linus. So I'm going to go with Sam Patterson here, but it's definitely not a fight to bet on because he could get clipped and KO'd at any time. Then we go to Oban Elliott versus Preston Parsons, a welterweight fight where Oban Elliott is 26 years old. He's 6 feet, 72 inches of reach, 10-2 on his record, and currently on a 6-fight win streak, 1-0 in the UFC against Val Woodburn. Preston Parsons is 29 years old, 5'11" with a 71-inch reach, 11-4 professionally, and he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. He's mainly a submission artist. He has no knockout wins. He's going to want to get Elliott on the ground, but Elliott is so well-rounded. That in general is going to make it a very hard fight for Preston Parsons to win. He's very well-rounded, so there's going to be a bit of a battle there for him trying to stop the takedowns of Preston Parsons and attempt to just outstrike him. Daniel Rodriguez destroyed Parsons on the feet, but that doesn't mean Parsons can't strike at all. He's got decent jabs, a decent body kick. He throws out a lot of left hooks while leaning his head to the right side and doesn't really have good reactive head movement. Oban Elliott on the other side, though, has very good boxing, extremely dangerous when he puts the pressure on you. Good combinations to the body, to the head. His hooks get around the guard very well. A lot better fundamentals, I think, than Parsons on the feet. He just gotta stop those takedowns. And Parsons, he kind of shoots like, I guess it's similar to like a Damian Maia, where he shoots, creates contact, gets on his knees, not a great drive, and he kind of fights to get you to the ground from there. It's not a blast double leg taking you off of your feet like Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson, right? It's not a GSP kind of takedown. So I think it should be easier for Oban Elliott to fight against, and I think he's gonna have the striking advantage here. So I'm gonna go with Oban Elliott, who's the underdog in the fight, to win by a decision. Then we go to the heavyweight division. division between Mick Parkin and Lukasz Brzeski. Parkin's 28 years old, 6'4", weighs 263 pounds, 79-inch reach, 9-0, undefeated. Most of his wins coming by knockout, and he's the guy who beat Mohamed Usman earlier this year. Lukasz Brzeski is 32 years old, a little bit older, 6'4", 78.3 inches of reach, and weighs 236 pounds. He's going to be giving up nearly 30 pounds to Mick Parkin, and he's 9-4, 1-1 professionally. Again, 1-3 in his last 4 fights. The only win was against Walter Walker. He's going to get probably destroyed. Mick Parkin's so much bigger. He's better in the clinch. He's just going to outmuscle him, outsize him. Brzeski doesn't even have that great of striking technique to be able to deal with Mick Parkin or even like great footwork or anything like that. So I think Mick Parkin's going to win this fight by a TKO. Then we go to Caolan Loughran versus Jake Hadley, a bantamweight fight where Caolan is 28 years old, 5'6", with a 68-inch reach, 9-1 professionally. His only loss was 2 fights ago to Taylor Lapilus. Jake Hadley is 27 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach, and 10-3 professionally, losing his last 2 fights. Caolan originally had another opponent, Ramon Tavares, who pulled out 4 days ago, so Jake Hadley is stepping in on a 4-day notice to go up against this prospect. Now, Hadley last fought about 2.5 months ago, right? He fought in May 11th of 2024 against Charles Johnson. So it's not like he has been completely inactive and not fighting at all, but 2.5 months can get you a bit out of shape, depending on your lifestyle, of course. And I think that's going to give Caolan a very big advantage in this fight, where if they both had a training camp, I think this fight would be very even, man. But I think Caolan's cardio is going to be better than Jake Hadley's. I think he's going to be in better condition to take punches. I mean, generally, this guy has a very good chin, so that's not going to be a problem for him ever until later in his career if he takes way too many shots. But I think his 1-2 is going to be on point. He might have a couple good leg kicks, might try to take down Hadley a couple times. It's going to be a well-rounded fight, competitive. Hadley's going to work off the feints a lot from the southpaw stance, trying to land that left straight, some left body kicks, maybe even come up to the head. That's actually a big weapon for Hadley that could catch Caolan, one of those left high kicks. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Caolan Loughran to win this by a decision. Man, I wish they both had a training camp because I think that would have been an amazing fight. Then we go to Molly McCann versus Bruno Brazil, a strawweight fight. Molly McCann is 34 years old, 5'4", 62-inch reach, 14-6 professionally, 1-2 in her last 3 fights, but looked really good when she came down to the strawweight division, showing her submission skills against Diana Belbita. Bruna Brazil is 30 years old, 5'6", 65.5-inch reach, 9-4-1 professionally, also 1-2 in her last 3 fights, but she's coming off a loss where McCann is coming off a win. This is going to be a very interesting one because from range, Bruna Brazil's got some good kicks. Right, go to the body, go to the head, long and flexible with her strikes. Even the 1-2 is pretty precise from long range as well. Molly McCann has to get in her face and throw down, swinging and banging, trying to knock this girl out. That's how she's going to have to win this fight, or take her to the ground and try to submit her. But Brazil is not completely out of her element on the ground either. So I do think that Molly McCann should be boxing, elbowing, kneeing her from close range, and just try to overpower her. She is coming from the flyweight division, whereas the most that Bruna Brazil ever weighed in for a fight was 118 pounds. She did fight a lightweight once, which is actually kind of interesting, but no way she actually weighed 155 pounds. Molly McCann's going to be the bigger fighter. She's going to be the stronger fighter most likely, and I do have her winning the fight, getting in close, and just slinging that leather around, similar to how she did against Luana Carolina and Hannah Goldie. But she definitely does not want to stay at range where Bruna Brazil is going to be kicking at her, because Bruna Brazil can win the fight like that. And Molly McCann is, of course, a huge favorite going into it, a 3-1 favorite. And then we go to Christian Leroy Duncan versus Gregory Rodriguez. That's a great fight, man. 2 middleweights. Christian Leroy Duncan is 28 years old, 6'2", with a 79-inch reach, 10-1 professionally on a 2-win streak, and looked amazing in both those fights against Claudio Ribeiro and Dennis Tululan. He's more of a striker, goes for the knockout, as does Gregory Rodriguez, who does have a grappling game to him, but majority of his wins are by knockout. He's 32 years old, 6'3", with a 75-inch reach. He's 15-5, also on a 2-win streak, and apparently Dennis Tululan is both of their sons. Got knocked out by both of them 2 fights ago. But Rob Obama is very strong, man, very powerful, walks you down and puts the pressure behind his hands. He's good in the clinch. I think he's going to be better on the ground as well. But this fight is most likely going to be in the stand-up for the majority of it. Christian Leroy Duncan is a lot more versatile. He's got excellent flexible kicks, works off the jab very well. I love this Ribeiro fight where he showed his entire arsenal, spinning kicks to the body, hopping side kicks, good 1-2s, very precise jab, use that reach excellently. But Rodriguez is going to get in this guy's face and make it nasty with Duncan. Now, I would think that Duncan would just pester him with the jab, hit him all over the place from legs to body to head, because Rodriguez doesn't have the best defense. He relies on his chin a lot, uses his physicality as a weapon, and because of that, he is there to be hit. But at the same time, if Duncan could not knock him out, if he can't get him off him, be powerful enough with his shots, then Rodriguez might drown Duncan later in the fight. It's just he has to keep up with the footwork, right? Duncan's going to be moving around, Duncan's going to be using that reach on him, and Rodriguez has to show some kind of defense to get his head off of the center line so he can enter in close on Duncan. So like, for an example, if Duncan is throwing out that jab constantly, Rodriguez is going to have to parry it or move his head to the right, enter behind that, throw maybe a left hook, and then get into a clinch, push Duncan up against the fence, and work off that. That would be a good tactic for Rodriguez, but I just don't know if he's going to do that. Now, if he takes Duncan to the ground, things get very interesting because he has good trips, he has a good hip throw that he used on Park a couple years ago. Rodriguez is very strong, very powerful when he gets a hold of you, but I'm going to go with Christian Leroy Duncan here. I think he's going to be a bit too fast, a bit too elusive, hit and move constantly, and maybe land some big right hands on Rodriguez that might rock him throughout the fight. That's a very close one to call, man. And then we go to Nathaniel Wood versus Daniel Pineda. Nathaniel Wood is 30 years old, 5'6", has a 69-inch reach, 19-6 professionally, coming off a loss to Muhammad Naimov, but he's 3-1 in his last 4 fights, where the Naimov fight was just so strange with all the fouls. I mean, Naimov was just cheating throughout the whole thing. He should have gotten at least a point deducted, and that definitely would have helped Nathaniel Wood a bit, or even a DQ with how dirty that fight was. But Daniel Pineda is 38 years old. 38 years old. 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. He's 28-15-3 professionally. He's 2-2-1 in the UFC. Beat Herbert Burns, Tucker Lutz, lost to Cub Swanson and Alex Caceres, had a no contest with Andre Fili. He's going to get absolutely destroyed by Nathaniel Wood. Wood is better than Pineda in most areas of the game, and Wood is also only getting better every time we see him. The only thing about him is he's kind of small for the featherweight division, so that's going to play against him in most of his matchups. But I do see Nathaniel Wood destroying and dominating Daniel Pineda, putting on a performance against him. Pineda's a pretty big guy. He's going to be stronger than Nathaniel Wood, most likely. He's got decent kicks. He dips his head a lot to the right. But other than the size and potential low kicks, there's not much he's going to do, I think, that's going to be a big problem for Nathaniel Wood, right? If it's not backed up by his size and strength, Wood should dominate this fight. And according to the betting odds, he's a 5-1 favorite. Minus 500 on the lines. And you can absolutely go and capitalize on that with MyBookie.ag. They have the best lines out there, and you can go and bet on all of these fights, like Leon Edwards being a minus 234 against Belal Muhammad, Tom Aspinall being a minus 380 against Curtis Blaydes. We got to talk about that later in the video. Bobby Green is a minus 120 against the 106 Paddy Pimblett. Quite interesting. Muhammad Mokaev is a minus 137 against the plus 107 Manel Kape. Arnold Allen minus 260 against the plus 195 Giga Chikadze. Nathaniel Wood minus 470 about 469 against the plus 320 Daniel Pineda. I definitely agree with that. Molly McCann minus 330 against the plus 244 Bruno Brazil. I don't think the odds should be that big because, again, it depends on the range that Molly McCann is going to be fighting at. If she stays outside too much, then Bruno Brazil is probably going to win the fight, most likely. But I would pick Molly McCann to win the fight, just not on those odds. Caolan Loughran is a minus 232 against the plus 177 Jake Hadley. I do not agree with those odds. I think it's much closer than that. Definitely not a fight I would bet on. Parker versus Brzeski, minus 280 against the plus 210. I agree with that. Oban Elliott is a plus 120 against the minus 154 Preston Parsons. That's quite interesting. Oban Elliott is actually the underdog here. So I do have an underdog pick there. Christian Duncan is a minus 142 against a plus 111 Gregor Rodriguez. I agree with that, but that's not a fight I would bet on. Sam Patterson is a minus 360 against a plus 260 Kiefer Crosbie. I do not agree with those odds. Sam Patterson has no boxing defense at all. He's there to be hit. He can get hit by overhands, left hooks, whatever you throw at him. If he's not trying to take you down or just fighting from long range, he's just an open target for punches. But I do think he's going to win the fight if he takes the fight to the ground, or if Kiefer Crosbie cannot get into close range. Shauna Bannon is a minus 216 against the plus 166 Alice Ardelean. So I'm picking a pretty moderate underdog in that fight. Modestas Bukauskaus is a -163 against a +127 Marcin Prachnio. I agree with those odds as well. Those are very interesting odds throughout the card, but straight picks aren't the only way to bet on these fights. You can also go with live betting, you can go with a parlay, go by the methods of victory like knockouts and stuff, if the fight goes to a decision or not. Like for an example, Caolan versus Jake Hadley is most likely going to a decision, so if you want to go and bet on that fight without picking a winner, you could just bet that the fight goes all 3 rounds as a safer pick, you know? And MyBookie's giving you a first deposit bonus where you can sign up for your first deposit and get matched up all the way up to $1,000. So if you put in like $50 for your first deposit, they'll put another $50 on top of that for you to play with. And all you gotta do is use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, to take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. Visit mybookie.ag today where you can win big. And let's get right into the main card with the first fight being Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. Both these fighters aren't the most active. Arnold Allen usually fights like once or twice a year. Giga Chikadze hasn't fought at all in 2024. His last fight was back in August of 2023 and usually fights like twice a year before that. So they have a similar level of activity, but the difference is Arnold Allen's been fighting the best in the featherweight division. He just fought Movsar Evloev in a very controversial decision loss, and before that lost to Max Holloway, which is no shade on Allen. I mean, he lost to one of the best featherweights that ever lived, but before that beat Kelvin Kattar, Dan Hooker, Sadiq Youssef, whereas the kind of guys that Giga Chikadze is fighting are like Alex Caceres. He lost to Kelvin Kattar pretty badly. He outstruck Edson Barboza, beat Cub Swanson, so he's being like these older guys, but once he gets to like the actual good fighters in their prime, such as Kelvin Kattar, he lost to them, but it's only one. So this is going to be another chance for him to prove the doubters wrong about his potential. In the beginning, everybody was high on Giga Chikadze, but now, after the Kelvin Kattar performance, everybody's like, okay, he just doesn't have the cardio to be an elite featherweight. He's got like 1 or 2 rounds in him where he's super dangerous, but then after that, he slows down a bit. And I think Allen's well-rounded style is going to expedite that a bit. Try to take him to the ground, push him up against the cage, wear him out, strike and wrestle, mix up the game on him, which will make it an easier fight for Allen in the 3rd round. But that first round is going to be quite dicey, especially because Allen likes to back away from opponents, which means he's going to give up a lot of range for Giga. Chikadze is going to dictate the pace of the fight most likely, or at least dictate the range, which is actually more important for Giga Chikadze to get off his kicks and that sniper of a straight that he has. He's very, very dangerous in the first round. Kicking at your body with the Giga kick, condition you for a kick to the head, then start sniping you from across the cage. Because this guy's so incredibly long and tall for this weight class, his opponents have to get in his face and take away that range from him, which I don't know if Allen's going to do. If he changes his game plan and starts pressuring Chikadze, I'm definitely going with Allen to win the fight. But if he's not pressuring, he's backing up too much, I can see Chikadze beating him. But because the cardio from Giga Chikadze is not that great, I'm going to go with Arnold Allen in this fight to win by a decision. I don't see Allen finishing him because if Kelvin Kattar couldn't finish him for 5 rounds after Chikadze was tired for most of that, I don't see Allen finishing him in 3 rounds. But Allen being a -260 is something I don't really agree with. If this was 5 rounds, -300, no, -400 for Allen in a 5-round fight. But in 3 rounds, Chikadze can absolutely win the fight. And then we go to the flyweight division with Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape. If the fight even happens, this fight might not even be a thing because Manel Kape just doesn't fight. What's going on? Maybe that's a bit unfair because most of the pullouts in like the last 5 or 6 scheduled fights for this guy, it wasn't him pulling out, but in his last 2, he was the one that kind of pulled out. I don't knock Matheus Nicolau for not fighting him after he missed weight. You gotta make weight, man. You know, that's practically cheating if you're going into the fight and missing weight like that. And if any fighter doesn't want to fight a heavier opponent who missed weight, that's perfectly fine. So hopefully Kape makes weight and he shows up to fight Mokaev, because man, that's an interesting fight if he fights Mokaev. Mokaev is a wrestler, tries to take it to the ground, hold you down for the most part. He's got some good kicks at times. He's kind of big for the weight class, but Manel Kape is very powerful, very dynamic, has an excellent flying knee, which is one of his best techniques, a devastating counter to a wrestler style like Mokaev's. Mokaev constantly shoots, he's trying to get you to the ground at all times. Manel Kape knows what his game plan has to revolve around, and he's got to put the pressure on Mokaev. He cannot allow Mokaev's wrestling style to dictate the pace of the fight and who's pressuring who. You always want to pressure back wrestlers, even though it's much easier said than done. That is usually what the game plan has to be in the to stand up with these guys, right? Especially the kind of wrestlers who like to lay on top of you. Because if Mokaev takes down Kape, he's going to hold him down like a blanket, round after round. And if he cannot stop that wrestling style, he cannot get frustrated about Mokaev. It's only on him. He knows what Mokaev is going to try to do to him. And on Mokaev's side, he's going to have to watch for the flying knee, for uppercuts, be very smart on which direction he moves his head when he shoots takedowns. If he puts his head on the inside, if he puts his head on the outside for the shot, knowing where he puts his head when he's shooting for takedowns is extremely important on avoiding the flying knee, because that's the risky thing about throwing flying knees at wrestlers. You can knock them out with one shot, or if you miss, pretty much guaranteed. So it's most likely going to be a striker versus grappler matchup, and ultimately my prediction for the fight, I'm going to go with Muhammad Mokaev. I think he's going to win it by a decision. Manel has gotten taken down by David Vorak, by Matthias Nicolau, and those guys don't wrestle like Mokaev does, and they're not as big as he is either. So I think we're going to see another lay and pray performance from Muhammad Mokaev. It is what it is, whatever. And he is a slight favorite, which I do agree with, a minus 137. But from a potential blanket fight to an exciting fight, we go to Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. And I am not calling him King Green. Out of all the fighters I could call King, I am not calling Bobby Green that. It feels like GSP, okay, maybe. It makes a little bit more sense. But this is a fight that could be a change of the guard. Bobby Green is 37 years old, where Paddy Pimblett is only 29, reaching the prime of his career. But Bobby hasn't aged like other fighters. He hasn't declined rapidly like other vets. I mean, he just beat Jim Miller, lost to Jalen Turner pretty badly. But the fact that he turned around and looked good against Jim Miller is actually very admirable. Before that, destroyed Grant Dawson and beat up Tony Ferguson. They both beat up Tony Ferguson. But I refuse to call Tony their sons. I refuse to do that. But then you look at Paddy Pimblett's record, and he's on a 7-win streak. It looks more impressive than it actually is, because when you look at the level of opponents that he was going up against, and the fact that he should have lost to Jared Gordon in 30-27, and that is the best opponent he beat, or a very old, past his prime shell of himself, the ghost of Tony Ferguson, there's a clear difference in level of competition these two guys are going up against, even recently. I mean, Jim Miller and Grant Dawson are probably better than everyone Paddy Pimblett has beaten in his entire career, with the only guy comparable is Jared Gordon, who beat Paddy Pimblett. Not only that, stylistically, Bobby Green is the better boxer of the two. He's better offensively and defensively. He has more power, maybe actually. Paddy hits pretty hard, but Bobby has enough power to punch away Paddy, right? If Paddy's just going on him, being aggressive, throwing haymakers, Bobby Green has the kind of power to get respect out of Paddy Pimblett, right? You can't just march him down and throw hands like that without getting stunned. But Paddy is going to be the better grappler of the two. I just don't know if he can take down Bobby Green. Bobby Green's wrestling has always been very underrated. The only fighter that has taken down Bobby Green in the last 4 years was Islam Makhachev. And Paddy Pimblett could not take down Jared Gordon at all. He shot 3 times and never got Jared Gordon on the ground. He took down Tony Ferguson once out of 4 attempts. And most of his takedowns are from the clinch. He's a lot better with his trips and throws than his traditional wrestling skills, which I think where Bobby Green has an advantage over Paddy Pimblett when it comes to just pure wrestling. So on paper, stylistically, Bobby Green should win this fight. He has the takedown defense. He's the better striker of the two. He's more experienced. The only thing that gets in the way of Bobby Green is the fact that he's so much older. That's the only thing. If this was prime Bobby Green versus prime Paddy Pimblett, or Paddy Pimblett now at least, Bobby Green wins that fight like 8 times out of 10. So even though I want to pick Bobby Green, I can see Paddy Pimblett swarming him out of nowhere and knocking him out. But if I do have to pick a winner here, who would win more times out of 10, I would pick Bobby Green to beat Paddy Pimblett. I see him stuffing most of the takedowns, outboxing him, landing good straights, switching stances, and confusing Paddy, counterpunching whenever Paddy wants to get super aggressive because his chin is just in the air. No defense, wild punches that can be very telegraphed. So I'm definitely going with Bobby Green to win this by a decision. I think Paddy Pimblett's chin is pretty decent. And on the betting odds, it's pretty much a pick'em. Very, very close. Not bad to bet on either fighter in my opinion. But I'm going to go with Bobby Green on that one. And then we go to the best fight on the entire card in my opinion. The co-main event for the heavyweight championship of the world. Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes, the rematch. Both fighters in their prime and both coming off a big win for themselves. Tom Aspinall destroying Sergey Pavlovich in the first round. Curtis Blaydes destroying Jailton Almeida, who before that lost to Pavlovich. So Aspinall's definitely riding a bigger momentum. He's the heavyweight champ. His only loss in the UFC is to Curtis Blaydes by an injury 15 seconds into the fight. And a lot of people talk about Blaydes beating Aspinall in those 15 seconds. Blaydes landed like none of those punches that he threw. Tom Aspinall was dodging the punches. He was out of range, showing better distance management, and he's only gotten better ever since. since, right? That was 2022. And his boxing has looked better, showing better low kicks as well, better footwork than ever before. The only thing that can get to Aspinall in the stand-up is the fact that he doesn't cover up his chin. And Blaydes is also getting better with his hands, letting that heavyweight power touch Aspinall's chin. So Aspinall's gonna have to be as elusive as ever. He's gonna have to be more technical with his boxing than ever before, because this is most likely gonna be a stand-up fight. I don't think Blaydes is gonna want to go to the ground with Aspinall, but here's the thing though. It's a bit of an unknown. When's the last time Aspinall was on his back on the ground without the knee injury? Because technically he was on his back in the Blaydes fight, but I'm saying someone take him down, wrestling with him, landing ground and pound shots, trying to transition, all that stuff. When's the last time Aspinall was in that position with his back on the ground? No one has ever taken him to the ground before, in the UFC at least. He might be complete garbage off of his back, and we have no idea. We know on top, he's a menace. Very strong, very powerful, goes for the submission. He's also intelligent. Doesn't really make many mistakes when he's grappling. But how is he off his back? That's the thing here. Maybe Blaydes wants to take him to the ground and test that area, because Blaydes has some of the nastiest ground and pound in the division. Statistically, he's the best wrestler by the numbers, but skillfully, probably not. John Jones is probably better than him. It's very interesting. It's 5 rounds. At some point, I do want to see if Blaydes takes him down and tests the ground game with Aspinall. It could be a real thing where Blaydes shoots a double leg, gets Aspinall on the ground, and starts just ground and pounding him into a finish right away. We have no idea how good Aspinall is on the ground when a wrestler is on top of him. But can you imagine the other way around? What if Aspinall takes down Blaydes because Jailton Almeida was able to, and then just submits him? Do you know how crazy that would be? That's why this fight is the best fight on the entire card, and one of the best heavyweight fights they could put on, because it's an actual heavyweight fight with real strategy involved. But I think the winner of this fight is going to be Tom Aspinall, and I think he's going to win by a 3rd round TKO. Either of these fighters can win the fight. It would not surprise me at all if Curtis Blaydes chins him and wins the heavyweight title. But I think Aspinall is going to be a bit too fast. I think his boxing is better. He's going to land some low kicks. He might take down Curtis Blaydes at the end of the rounds just to test the wrestling a bit, feel it out, and also try to secure the rounds, going for submissions and stuff like that. Because Blaydes is not a submission artist, right? He's not a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. So taking him to the ground is not going to be as dangerous unless you're Jailton Almeida holding on for dear life, because you don't want to box with him and he's landing hammer fists. So I do see Aspinall winning the fight by a TKO. And then we go to the main event. In many ways, the sleeper of the fight, Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2. It's going to be a technical fight. It's going to be a chess match. I don't think it's going to be as dominating, one-sided as people think it's going to be. I think Belal Muhammad is going to put up a fight with Leon a bit. I think his wrestling and his strength has increased. He's gotten better in that department. He's able to transition from boxing to wrestling better than ever before. But Leon has also gotten way better with his wrestling. Way better at that. His fights in preparation for Kamaru Usman has helped him tremendously in his grappling. And he's always going to be the better striker. But I just think Leon is way more dynamic. He's more athletic. He's faster. He's more powerful. He's more precise. He has better footwork. Well, actually, I don't know about better footwork. He puts himself in bad positions at times and he just doesn't know it until the opponent lands on him. Then he's like, oh, okay, I got to get out of this. But Belal is better at mixing up the game seamlessly. Like the transitions from striking to wrestling is way better than what Leon does. He has higher output. He might have better cardio. And I know a lot of people make fun of Belal Muhammad, but he is pretty intelligent as a fighter. Like he knows what he's got to do to win the fight. He knows how to win on points. And he does have a lot of momentum behind him, or should I say a lot of confidence about himself. And that goes a long way for a fighter. So it would not be shocking to me if Belal actually beats Leon, mainly using his wrestling, and transitions from boxing to wrestling, right? That mid-ground, like that bridge between those two. He does better than most fighters in the welterweight division, to be honest. But my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Leon Edwards to defend his title in a rather competitive fight with Belal Muhammad, but ultimately winning it by a decision. I don't think the fight's going to be that exciting. When these two go up against each other, it's just hard for a banger of a fight to happen, right? Belal's not super dangerous as a puncher, as a kicker, as a submission artist, and most of the time Leon isn't either. Leon's precise and he hits hard at times, but he just doesn't go for the finish when he can. There's a lot of fights where he could have just went for the finish and he just doesn't do it. He'd rather just ride it out to a decision. That's happened many times throughout his career, and I don't see anything different with Belal Muhammad. Now, someone could say he might be a lot more aggressive like he was the first time because Belal isn't a power puncher, so there's not that much risk for Leon to be super aggressive. aggressive, but I think the transitions to the wrestling is the threat to Leon Edwards this time. If he gets very aggressive and gets taken down because of that, Leon is going to be patient. Can you imagine though, Belal is beating Leon Edwards, and then in the 5th round, Leon's coach has got to give him that speech again? What are you doing, Leon? Belal's beating you up. He's boxing you up. He's wrestling you. You're not even in this fight. He just starts trying to get Leon Edwards into the fight, give him the speech against Belal Muhammad would be so funny. But I do see this being a competitive fight. So my prediction for the fight is Leon Edwards wins the fight by a decision. I think he wins 48-47. And that's the predictions for the UFC 304 card. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.